When I was 9 years old, my family and I were in a pretty bad car accident. It was late summer, the last day of day camp. That Friday morning, I sat shotgun, and as my mother drove us in, we approached a stop sign at the bottom of a hill. There was a large truck parked in the oncoming direction of the intersection, and while we were turning left, a speeding vehicle smashed into our car in a head-on collision. I remember the whole thing in slow motion. The sound of a million soda cans being crushed rang in my ears. I immediately felt a pain in my neck, a hotness on my forehead, and my chest was heavy, immobile. Reaching my hand toward my forehead, I felt a shallow, wet gash. The impact of my head hitting the dashboard created a deep laceration. Looking over at my mother, her head slumped over the steering wheel, facing away from me, I felt sick. My brother's crying in the back seat was deafening, and he was only 6. It was about 8 in the morning, so our car wreck must have jammed up a street busy with commuters. A woman holding a large portable house phone was on the phone with 911 and asked me about a million questions. She needed the name, address, and phone numbers of my mother, my father, and my grandmother. Luckily, I was able to answer them all and stay conscious until the paramedics arrived. In the hospital, I spent 2 nights puking and crying, wondering if my mom and brother were okay. My Aunt Patty kept me company, and the woman who called 911 brought me a baseball and told me how brave I was. On the 3rd day, I tried to walk and got a chance to look in the mirror at my new reflection. 180 stitches stared back at me. Because I did not sustain a head fracture, I was sewn up like a broken toy and allowed to go home. My brother Randy sustained only a small cut in his eyebrow, so he never even needed to spend a night in the hospital. Mom was not so lucky. When we said goodbye to her, she looked like a purple mummy. Her head was wrapped with sterile bandages and her leg was raised in a gigantic cast. She sustained a compound fracture in her tibia and fibula from the steering column and crushed her forehead on the steering wheel. She was so drugged up from the surgery that it barely registered for her what was happening to us. She would lose her children for the next 3 months. Aunt Patty was going to take my brother and me to her house, where we would start at a new school and live with our cousins upstate. The plan was to go home and pack our things and then say goodbye to Mom and head out on an unknown adventure. Aunt Patty and Uncle Johnny lived in Storrs, Connecticut with their 3 boys, my cousins, Stephen, Michael, and Kevin. The Barry family did everything for us. Every meal was provided, along with new shoes for school, help during homework time, trips to the farm, and even Halloween costumes. Randy and I got to share bunk beds in our very own room while the 3 boys, all similar ages, bunked together down the hall. The Barrys made room for us, not just in their house, but in their hearts. A Christian family, they said grace over meals each night and blessed their children by the bedside too. Randy and I were also cared for this way. Growing up in a Jewish household, we were uncomfortable at first, but realized Aunt Patty and Uncle Johnny's good intentions were to keep us safe during a turbulent time in our lives. In their home, they established rituals and customs of value to build the character of their children. Virtues like honor, forgiveness, humility, and respect guided their actions. And as it is here at Landon, we used to remind my brother and I when we fought and when we needed discipline. I can never repay the kindness my family showed us during this crazy time in our lives. What Randy and I learned at the Barry home fell apart the moment we moved back in with our mother that November. Switching school districts yet again, Randy and I were unmoored. A wig covered our mother's stapled forehead, and she needed a wheelchair to support her broken leg, pinned together with frightening surgical instruments. Mandated trips to a social worker did not stop the fighting between my brother and I. We were angry because so many things had shattered. We were upset that Mom was debilitated and that we could not fix her either. We tried to work together, but as family often does, we broke and glued the pieces back together over and over again. Nearly 30 years later, I stand before you here today with evidence, the scar, from when I bonked my head, so to speak. My mom and brother and I are stronger, more resilient individuals because of the innumerable people and systems who helped us recuperate. American taxpayers contributed their hard-earned money toward important social services programs that helped my family receive food stamps, mental health counseling, Social Security, and free school lunches that made it possible for us to get back on our feet. I appreciate the several different public school districts provided fast action communication to take our records across the state in order for my brother and I to receive a free and equitable education. I'm thankful for the Good Samaritan woman who fearlessly called 911 and stood next to my bleeding, helpless family, waiting for help to arrive. I'm grateful for my Aunt Patty and my Uncle Johnny who took us into their home, and I'm so thankful for the unconditional love they shared. Our lives were upended, and certainly our roots were ripped up several times, but through it all, we had each other. I'm grateful for the bonds that my mother, brother, and I share. I'm grateful for the losses we endured because they taught us to appreciate the fragility of life and the importance of family. The next time you think about the story of your life, consider who helped you respond to the setbacks and what they did to help you overcome them. Who will be around to support you? How will you respond when you are called to the task to care for a loved one? Here at Landon, we depend on one another because our brotherhood requires it. All of us are responsible for one another because we are a family. We are united by a common culture defined by our celebrated differences, and I am grateful that we are always stronger together. This I believe.